Welcome to Horror Movies with Friends. I'm your host, Andy Green, aka Wolfmandy Screame, at least the next 26 days. We'll see if we can survive that long. This is day 5 of 31 different horror movies, 31 different screamed guests, 31 different drink pairings from small businesses around the world, all coming together on this couch, on this haunted Zoom, to talk, horror movies. And I'm doing so in conjunction with the fundraiser for the Trevor Project, a foundation that is really important to me, that is dedicated to helping LGBTQ plus youth. And today's guest, I'm very excited. This is the first time we've ever met. We had an awkward conversation. No, it was great. It was a wonderful conversation for 10 minutes before we are live. This is Logan Ashley Keisner. Welcome to this haunted Zoom. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Logan, what movie did you have us watch today?
All right, so today we watched Bit by Brad Michael Elmore.
And that's 2019, right?
2019, released widely, I think, in 2020. It's one of those festival-wide release issues.
Okay. And that's as we know, a funky time to be released was 2020 and beyond. So yeah, that's why it wasn't on my radar at all. I hadn't heard of it. And also the title is great, but it's a hard one to search for. That's what
title to search for.
Yeah, it's because bit has a lot of different meanings. And it's also short. That's my one note, Brad Michael Elmore. No, and then I wanted to say that it's on Amazon Prime and Tubi TV. So if you want to watch along, or before, we spoil this movie or whatever we're about to do, watch it. It's worth watching for sure. Or if you're one of those people who likes to read the book, or like the end of the book before you see the movie or whatever, I just, combined a bunch of metaphors there. You had your warning. There you are. I didn't know I needed to do a warning, but bit talk is happening now, but we can't really get bit, in my mind, without a little bit of coffee. So Logan, are you ready for some coffee?
I am. I have it right here.
Ooh, oh yeah. So, we got a Snoopy mug. All right. So this is my pour over here, percolating. And this is a Thread Coffee Roasters. And this is a woman and queer employee owned business in Baltimore, Maryland. And even today in the email, they were like, not used to sending as far west as us, which is exciting. We're hoping to broaden their brand there. This is our first time trying these beans. What did I choose? A Las Diosas, the goddesses. And this is a Nicaraguan coffee. My first Nicaraguan coffee. Is this your first Nicaraguan coffee?
Mine as well.
And I won't cheat and look at the tasting notes. But here we go. I'm going to pour for this beautiful laptop camera here. And this is actually not how I'm supposed to do it. I got to take the filter out. So that would have been a disaster. So actually, pause. All right. Very scared to spill. This will spill all over my DVDs. All right, here we go. Let's see. Ooh. Yeah, so it's a medium roast, not too dark. Has kind of a caramel color. It kind of looks like chocolate. This is a lot of coffee. Okay. I got these mugs thinking they were normal size, but I think it works for this purpose. So Logan, cheers.
Cheers.
Good morning. Let's see what are we getting there?
Not much of a coffee drinker, but I really kind of like this.
That's my goal, is to, well, I don't know if I want to get everyone to become a coffee drinker, but to just sort of be like, oh, coffee can taste like this, or it's not just diner coffee or black bitter, which I think is what I thought it was for so long too, and why I was resistant. But to me, I get a little bit of orange.
Mm-hmm. A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and a little, and it kind of does taste like a chocolate orange to me. But maybe that's because I said it looked like chocolate and then I made it happen. Or it's because I cheated and it says orange, chocolate, and peanut. Wow. So we'll never know if I cheated or not. So, okay. Now that we're tasting this coffee, if we had to pick a vampire character from popular fiction, who do you think would either drink this coffee, rock this coffee, or like whose essence is in these beans? Keep in mind, this is a bullshit question.
I don't know. Laurel's on my mind right now.
Laurel's on your mind. Yeah. I and for good reason. Well, I think it's maybe because this one isn't easily characterized.
Very gentle too. It's like, I'm not usually a fan of just like straight coffee, but this is pretty good.
My wife was like, "Are you going to offer cream to people?" And I was like, "No." Do I need to do that? She's like, "That's kind of rude." And I'm like, "Oh, the point is to have the coffee." But I was like, "Yeah, you're not wrong. It might be rude." But I'm glad. But you had that experience. If you had creamed it up, maybe you wouldn't have. So yeah, okay. So it's a gentler roast, and but it's a nice way to wake up, right? And I feel like she definitely gets an awakening in this movie, for better or for worse. So Logan, tell me, I guess, where this movie hit you and why it's important to you and why you chose it.
Yeah, so a little bit of backstory on myself. I've been writing about transgender horror and that kind of like niche genre for the past year or so. And it just started out as like this like curiosity. I'm like, okay, I watched, I think, Terror Train and a different movie like back to back, and it really like woke up in the back of my mind. I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen this written about anywhere before. And it really hasn't been to like the extent that I'm trying to do it, which is like every single film and form a cohesive timeline. And so Bit was interesting to me because I found it on that first initial sweep, and it's been review bombed to hell and back on IMDb. I think just for the fact that it features a transgender character prominently and it features feminism prominently in its description.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
It's like IMDb bombing. It's basically just giving terrible reviews for no reason, just to be an asshole. Okay, great. Everything is bad. Okay.
They see a buzzword in the descriptor and they're like instant 1 star. It's like that for a lot of these movies, actually.
They need to do, how like to prove that you're a human when you're signing things, you have to like,
a little captcha.
You have to click the street lights or whatever. And I'm always terrible at that. No, it's like they need to prove that you've seen the movie. There needs to be some sort of metric where
like questionnaire.
Or just like, maybe stills from the movie, pick which, and they should be obvious to people that have seen it. I don't know, like it might be too hard for even people that have seen it because they're probably on their phone while they're watching it. But I don't know. That's my good idea for the day. But yeah, that sucks. And so you came at it. Were you worried about it in terms of it? Yeah.
I was a little worried about it just because the descriptor, so like the main descriptor of the movie is this transgender girl moves to LA and she falls in with this group of feminist intersectional vampires. And so just in the description, it's like, okay, this is either going to be good or it's going to be really bad. So I definitely went into it apprehensively. But I've seen it like 3 or 4 times now. I have the DVD, which is only available in the UK. So I had to jump through some Amazon hoops to get that. But
show the people your shirt.
I also had this shirt made off the poster. I have a little mini print of the poster as well that I had printed out for myself on the wall up there. But I've just come around to this movie so much.
Yeah, so I mean,
really good.
The spoilers there is that you do enjoy it, and your fears were sort of unfounded in some ways. I think there may be, and we'll get to it. I think there were some things that I had questions about, but they're also, yeah, it is exactly what you said, and it's a huge, I guess, not necessarily a huge leap. Like this movie's very stylized, and it starts off right as like sort of making fun of Twilight, but it has a lot of Buffy in it, I would say. It feels very like that sort of in terms of dialogue and vibe. But it also even sort of goes into being slightly Twilighty and sometimes too. And just sort of addressing that most movies are made for white men. And the beginning scene was when I was in, when we just rip out the white dude's heart and burn it on fire. Yeah, I'm in at that point. That's the movie I want to see. And I have to admit that I was just like all about Duke from, frame one. But Yeah, like how has the sort of journey of this movie been for you? Like, that was the first watch, were you immediately on board, or like, because you said you've like come around on this movie, or it's sort of like, I understand what you mean, like each watching you sort of appreciate it even more, is that?
Yeah, I'm definitely like 50-50 on B movies made in like the 21st century. They feel just like most of them feel completely different from like B movies in like the 80s and the 90s, I guess. Like there's a sort of authenticity that I think has been lost in a lot of B movies. Like now people I think are just trying to like make B movies to make a B movie. They're not trying to let it happen naturally. And
Mm.
this definitely felt like this is somebody who wants to tell a story. They don't necessarily have the budget of like an A-list Hollywood film, but they're still going to stylize it in the way that they can and make it entertaining and exploitative in a fun way, not in a gross, grimy, weird kind of way. Like this could have turned out to be very exploitative if a worse director writer had had the idea and took it first.
Well, yeah, and this is a white male director, right? And it's sort of and to me, as a white male who is a creative and wanting to tell stories that aren't just about me, but also wanting to sort of collaborate and be, it was nice to see it. Clearly, I couldn't have come just from him. Clearly, it was a collaborative set, and that was really reassuring to me.
Yeah,
Um,
I've read interviews where he said that Brad Michael Elmore said he passed the script on to a few transgender friends. They gave him some notes, and I think that's very obvious in the film's final existing form.
I really appreciated that. I mean, there's a way, if you're not paying attention really, that you wouldn't necessarily know that Laurel is trans. You only know that because of, I mean, like you said, it's in the description, and it's sort of, and that's how I came to it through you, is like, oh, it's a trans horror film, I want to see this. But I really liked how they handled it. I mean, there were definitely references and sort of like the backstory of her, like that happening, and just sort of the trauma that she had, like but like the high schooler just being like, oh, I'm so proud, like
You're
so
so
in awe
brave.
of, yeah, yeah. And it's just like so demeaning, but also I could totally see myself being that asshole too, because like I mean, he was drunk, but he was also like, I think he meant like, I don't
He
know,
meant
not,
it well.
I mean, maybe they're like the sober version of that person meant it well, I think. But when you're 18 and drunk and it's high school graduation, there's not, I really like that scene a lot, where they're just sort of analyzing the shit show in front of them. And the friendship between Laurel and Andy was really nice. I immediately, it was just like, oh, these are real people. That
Yeah,
did the rest of the movie, it was maybe a little bit, it is very over the top and stylized, but though that character and then the relationship with Mark grounds the movie to me to make it feel real. That scene at the end where he yells at Laurel, I really,
yeah.
really appreciate it, because I think that needed to happen. And that grounds the movie too, that relationship. What do you think of how they dealt with the vampires and sort of the mythos?
I have a whole little list of talking points on a piece
Oh,
of paper
please.
over here. I was
Maybe
going to
you
bring
should
that
just
up.
lead this conversation. Yeah. You're the
No,
expert.
I was going to ask you that too, because I am very much not a traditionalist in the sense of vampires. I really, really like it when movies mess with the established like pop culture mythos. Like my other favorite vampire film is called Sundown, the Vampire in Retreat. It's this
Ooh.
Bruce Campbell, Deborah Foreman, like David Carradine movie from the late 80s.
Oh, I have
And
not seen that.
it like all the vampires walk around in the sun with giant hats and sunglasses and sunscreen, and that's how they deal with that. So this
That's
is very much similar to that. I like that they have the blood drinking and they have a few of the established like rules, but otherwise they're just kind of like, oh yeah, we're vampires. It's just kind of another facet of our personality.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of about the lifestyle, and that's what the movie's about a little bit. It's a very LA movie, like painfully so, as someone who's watching it from LA. Oh, and before I'll answer your question, but I don't want to forget this. I not only have I been to the Echo, which is where that was. My wife has actually been to the Echo where Death Valley Girls were performing. So that was like when she was watching, she's like, "Oh my god!" She's like, "Was I there?" And then I've seen Death Valley Girls in Death Valley, or actually no, I was in Joshua Tree. So that was just like it was just like, whoa, this is close to home here. And and being that LA person, like, oh, you wouldn't drive that way to get to the Echo. That's the most LA thing. I was like, oh, I guess I've become that person. That's what happens. But anyway, in terms, I agree with you. I think rules are like, why does it matter? I think as long, like, I think you just need maybe a certain, like, I think playing with it is the point. You know, we've seen so many different vampire stories taking leaps and changing the rules. That's the only thing that you can do to make it interesting or new or surprising. So like the only way they die is like burning their heart, which is, I think, has for sure a thematic thing in there too. It's not only really cool visually, because now you have to like actually rip someone's heart out to kill someone, and that's always fun to see. Like, we want to see someone's heart ripped out in a movie, I think, right? That's why we come. And then, I mean, the flying was to me was the Twilight moment of like, do we need that? I don't know. But it was also, I think they did need it to be like, my thought was like, okay, it was a pretty rough, like, she didn't really have a choice, but she did have a choice. And she just like woke up and is now a vampire her first day in LA. She needed like a win. Is that how you read that? And I was like, oh, you can fly now.
Yeah, I think it sums up the movie, which is a little bit goofy and a little bit cringy, but ultimately just like this fun fantasy that you can just take off in and enjoy.
100% fantasy. Like, because that first day was like, oh my God, this is the dream LA day. Like, the first year in LA is horrible, but you're like, she's already at a cool show meeting like hot, awesome women, badasses, the Bite Club, you know, and Izzy is just like the coolest. And then of course it goes dark from there, but it really is this sort of fantasy, especially since, we don't see a trans character at the front of this, or a trans being, as Duke says, like a god or becoming that. Is it empowering? Like, I mean, I know it's empowering to watch, but there's also like the other things where like she's now eating her brother, you know? So, but like, so it's good that it's not just like pie in the sky time.
And I have a weird relationship with this movie. I like it as a film, but also just like where it sits in the timeline. Because to date, this is the only horror film with an explicitly transgender protagonist. It's the only one. And especially the fact that it's played by a transgender actress, and it's so focused on making, I wrote down in my notes, it acknowledges without defining by, which I think is super important, because there are so many like in trans horror, like, oh, here's the twist. They're explicitly this weird thing. Let's move on from that. And this is one of the few movies where it's like, it's an important aspect of her personality and it's not erased, but it's not the only driving force behind what she does and how she is as a person.
Yeah. And that is really important. And it's also really cool that this is the first one, but it's also not so, well, it's also
cool like it's 2020.
Right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that it's cool that it's the first one based on the time. I meant that in it being the first one, it's still actually sort of subtle and respectful of it rather than the other way. Because Terror Train, I actually watched that earlier this month, or I guess last month, in prep for this, and also just because I read your article and your piece, and that's why I reached out to you. And then of course we all know Sleepaway Camp, and it's always it's always a twist. It's always like, this is why this person's a monster killing people, sort of a thing, or it's just for shock value or gross. And that is gross in terms of the intent behind it, not the actual images. Or so this, and it's really cool. Like, is Lindsay Maines? Is that the actress?
Nicole Maines.
Nicole Maines. Prior to her acting career, she was the anonymous plaintiff in the Maine Supreme Judicial Court case Doe versus Regional School Unit 26, where she argued her school district could not deny her access to the female bathroom for being transgender. So Nicole is an activist already coming to this, and it's so, I don't know, it is inspiring to watch, and it's just, I'm really glad it's a good movie. That's the main That's the main thing, because it is a big leap, but it's confident. I think that's why it works. Do you have any qualms with the movie, or any parts that you like less than others?
I think the beginning is its roughest part, where it just has to establish all this stuff, and it's just a little bit shaky before Bite Club shows up. There's some B plot threads that just kind of fizzle out, like her friendship with Andy. He's like the only name I didn't write down in my notes. But point just kind of fizzles out into the wind at the end. And I would rather have seen that either finalized or just kind of get cut. But besides that, I don't really have any major like movie breaking moments for me, which is nice.
For me, I agree with you on the Andy front. They unfortunately used Andy's like suicide attempt and call for help as sort of a way to bring her back into herself and be like, oh, you know, you have a family, you have a life, like you're addicted to this lifestyle. And, you know, literally I've had that situation with Andy before with the friend who is no longer with us, why I'm doing this show. So that is a powerful thing, but I feel like we could have used it so much, maybe more emotionally or better, but I still liked the scene in that she was blaming Mark or then Mark was like, hey, I've been by your side this whole time and my life is defined by you. And that totally felt real to him and like that his parents, there's a reason that they're so neurotic and worried because of all the backstory. Like you mentioned, it's like, it's a part of her character, but we sort of don't see it. But Mark's been living with that. And I think they could have done more with it. Or like you said, maybe done a little bit without it. And then, you know, so the Andy scene where he bought tickets to go see her was sort of awkward and also made me not like Andy as much as because Andy was great, I thought, in the first season. I'm like, and I understand he's like going through some shit. We don't know exactly what, but it's like, you don't buy tickets to go somewhere without telling that person. That's friend rule number one. Unless it's a surprise. I don't know. Maybe that's me.
It's a surprise and you don't tell them. You just show up.
Yeah. Would you like that as a friend, just showing up at your door right now?
Depends on the friend, but usually no.
Right. Well, it's also like, I have a life, it's not, or like, and it's not that I don't like want to see you and hang out, but like, I probably have something I'm doing and you're just showing up at my house. Yeah. I hate that move, Andy. But it was a cry for help and she was not listening. I think I thought it was hilarious, but I think the expo dump, Duke does a lot of expo work here. The like middle of the movie where she's like become a vampire and she's like, what's your backstory? And it's like a whole nother movie where she's like in the 70s, like, and she, ran away from home. She was 15, had to be a prostitute to survive. And then sort of like she gets empowered and finds her people. And then of course, Vlad, who is so over the top, the like 70s dance movie thing. It's funny. And I think it's supposed to be.
Yes.
But it was such a long interlude. I was sort of like, oh man, that like, I don't know if we needed all of it. But it was
such a weird scene. But the minute that Rasputin needle drop starts, I'm in for the whole thing.
Right. Exactly. I was going to say, if we're going to have this expo, this weird backstory, when you have Boney M's Rasputin playing, I will forgive almost anything. So yeah, and it was a delight. And I think that's why, and this movie had a great soundtrack. I Shazammed a couple songs, like the one by the Expats at the beginning, like Everyone Loves My Mother or something like that, where she's just sort of jealous that everyone likes her mom more than her. That one actually resonated with me as someone with a cool mom. Oh yeah, let's revisit the coffee. How is it sitting with you? Is it creating a thirst for more? Is this the now you're in?
Now I'm gonna have to start ordering cross-country coffee.
Cross-country coffee. It's very smooth is the answer. And I mean, smoother, I would say smoother than the movie, but the movie, I think the rough edges sort of are what make it fun.
Yeah. It gives it like a personality that I think it wouldn't. First of all, this movie wouldn't be made if it was made by like a major horror studio. I'm going to say that right now. Like, there's no way a horror studio would acknowledge transness in a main protagonist role right now. Like, it barely does it in supporting roles, let alone like, this is not only our protagonist, but central to the plot.
Right. And I mean, it's why she becomes a vampire. I mean, the line where she's like, my life has already been a horror movie, so might as well. How does that line hit you? I was sort of like, really? I mean, and not that I don't believe that it was a hard life. It just was sort of the way it was. Yeah.
It's one of many on the nose moments, which I can definitely see either like loving or hating. I don't think it's that scene. I think it's a few scenes prior, but there's Duke has a dialogue where she ends it with "We're made to be monsters, so let's be monsters." And that line is just like it's probably my favorite line in like the last 10 years of just like cinema. I love it. Not only like the context of the movie, but again, just the wider history. Because gather my thoughts. Uh transgender characters in horror have always been defined outside of autonomy. Like it's always mentally ill first, transgender as a symptom of that. Like mental illness is portrayed as a symptom of, oh no, there's something like wrong with you. And so this is like one of the first, if not the first, characters in horror where it's like, okay, you're made to be this, but also you have a choice in how that relationship with inherent monstrosity affects you and how you show that, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I love that line too, and sort of the historical context of it. I mean, it was in particular, I mean, because it extended to not just trans, but to women in general, because it was sort of like the world has made us out to be monsters. Let's just own it. And I think a previous film that we watched, Hagazusa, had sort of the same thing with witchcraft, where it's just like the world is sort of assuming and making you become this thing, you know, and it's just like, well, this is what you asked for or wanted, or like and I think that attitude, that anger, I respect and admire and also agree with in a lot of ways. You know, I think, and what makes Duke such an interesting character is that she does lose herself in it. And also I want to say, I'm not, you mentioned they're intersectional. I don't know, we don't know their pronouns, these characters' pronouns, do we? I
Not within the context of the movie. I might be wrong about this, but I vaguely remember Brad Michael Elmore tweeting that at least Frog is supposed to be, I think, non-binary. I'm not sure about Roya and Izzy exactly.
Okay.
But I think they're all pretty coded as if not outright transgender, then certainly gender non-conforming.
Okay. So I probably should refer to them as them then in this scenario. All right. Please correct me if yeah. Duke has all these rules about the bike club, no men. And that rule, I think, is a good rule, because men can't be trusted with power. But but
Duke is she.
Duke is a she? Okay.
Yeah.
She is falling in the same trap that Vlad did, right? She is eating his heart, which is a really cool thing. And it's sort of like dropping acid, it feels like, even the way that it's done, it's like on the tongue. Because you're unable to kill Vlad. They have his heart in basically a vault and in a chest. But she's keeping that from everyone else. And that's what we find out. And so basically, I think that's an interesting thing, because I mean, especially in a film filled with non-binary people, it's not binary in terms of all men are shitty, all women are great, or whatever it is. And I think that's a very important distinction, and what makes Laurel a great character at the end there with that conversation on the rooftop with Mark, poor Mark, who's just like, I don't want to be a vampire. Like, what movie am I in? Like, I was just an actor.
Now here I am.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's absolutely another element I love, because there's so many like feminist horror movies that are mostly just power fantasies, which in and of itself is not like a bad thing, but they tout feminism and then just go full binary, all men are evil, all women are untouchable. And that's what I really appreciate about this movie, is it acknowledges that like, no, like cruelty festers regardless of gender, and it has to be regardless of gender that we deal with this.
And the point, I think, at the end, I mean, while I don't know if I agree with like, let's all be vampires, like sharing the power, sharing the heart, you know, that to me, and even the symbology of that, okay, like we're all going to be, I mean, eating a heart sounds a little bit more morbid, but the idea that's like we all we're sharing our heart together, and it's not this us them or me you in the other room not even knowing, and that was a really, that to me is the best. I mean, that is what needs to happen. I'm not sure. I mean, obviously with the genre film, you can take these huge leaps and stuff, but I agree. Like, that's why I love this movie.
I like that it takes the body horror and like transition narrative of a vampire and like directly applies that to transgender transition. Like that's one of the things that frustrates me why there's no transgender protagonists in horror. There are so many story opportunities just in body horror alone and just in transformation horror alone that like the parallel is right there. Like people just got to step up and take it and stop being afraid of portraying trans people.
Well, and that, and you're right, because I know you mentioned ginger snaps as another one, like the werewolf transformation is another, like any, I guess any sort of monstrous transformation where your body is changing, you can make that leap, you can make that connection, and sort of coming into your new self. But is the that it's not being used? I mean, there's a many reasons, right? Because like you said, studios, people with money are too afraid or don't want to do it. Um, but also like I feel like Brad Michael Elmore, I'm not gonna make him the hero of this, but like it's very brave for him to have made this movie because it really can only work out poorly for him in a way, because if he screws it up, he's an asshole or whatever. So it's like it,
Yeah.
we want a trans director to do that, right? We want and but that's the problem, is that there's a barrier to entry on that.
Yeah. And writing about trans horror, there's been an explosion in the last like 2 or 3 years of short films made by trans directors, but there hasn't really been another feature. The closest thing we have like in the distant horizon is Silas Howard is making a trans horror film called Moonshadow, but that one has there hasn't been any new news on it for like 4 years. So I'm a little apprehensive we're never gonna see that. But no, it's absolutely, and I'm glad that he made this, and I'm glad that he was um, intentionally sensitive. I think this movie really highlights the importance of sensitivity reading
Yeah.
because there was absolutely a way in which this movie turned out like exploitation horror on the bad way instead of like in a fun power fantasy kind of way that it did.
What what trans horror movie are you gonna write? What are we gonna, yeah,
I've got a
or
werewolf one that I'm very happy with right now
ooh.
and very heavily inspired by Ginger Snaps. I've also got a werewolf story that I've turned into a novel that is taken very heavy inspiration from Bit as well. I like taking that transition narrative and seeing like there's so much you can do with it, man.
I'm so excited to, well, I would love to read it and excited to see those happen. And I feel like they will. I got so much more coffee, but I think this is indicative of, I mean, this is me saying it. I hope this is how, like, there's much more to mine here in terms of this movie and in terms of our relationship going forward. Like I'm so grateful that you sort of took up on like a random email from, I mean, yeah, a cis white dude being like, what am I doing? So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, like I am always pushing this movie onto people. Whether or not they're going to like it isn't up to me, but like it is grossly underrated. And I think a part of that is just like there's been no marketing for this like at all. And I think if the studio like actually pushed this like somewhat, it'd get a bigger audience and get the following it deserves.
I think so too. And hopefully, this is the start. All right. The continuation of that marketing. This Thread Coffee and Wolfmandy and Logan Ashley Keisner. We're trying to make it happen because it does deserve more eyes on it. And I hope everyone out there finds it on Amazon or Tubi. And so yeah, thanks again for being on the show. Thank you all for watching. It's a little bit different this time. This is our first Zoom, and there will be more. And yeah, I again just want to say that I'm doing this in honor of my friend Chris, who in the middle of the night the other night, I sort of woke up and I was like, Chris would not want to be the center of attention. He would hate this. And I realized that's because because he was so wanted to be in the shadows or wanted to not, he was too afraid. So I mean, I go back and forth, and I try not to make it, it's not about him, but to me, it's just important because no one should feel embarrassed or scared to be who they are. And so that's why I am, being Wolfmandy this month too. I don't know what that really means, but I'm just going forward, seeing what happens. So if you can, I know times are tough. There's a link below for the Trevor Project fundraiser for this month in honor of my friend and all the others that we've lost in the past few years and beyond. So thank you all for coming on this journey. Tomorrow, I believe, we have my Uncle Tom. That's right. An original Monster Kid coming to deliver to me the weirdest Godzilla movie in his mind, Godzilla versus Hydra. I have not seen it yet, but that's going to be happening tomorrow. I hope you check it out. It's on HBO Max. And in the meantime, I will see you at the next phase of the moon. Let's howl at the moon for the friends we miss, the friends we wish were here to see this.